So you're on. Go ahead.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to be with you guys. As Marvin was mentioning, clearly it's not the same. I do miss seeing a lot of friendly faces, and hopefully this will pass pretty soon. So today, what I wanted to talk about was about living generously, and when I think what that looks like, I think that living generously is the first part, but the second part is trusting God, because I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think it's if your story is anything like mine, I think it's hard to live generously if you don't trust God. So my first polling question for tonight, Marvin will place it on there. So no one can see your answer. So just answer anonymously. Bill, that was your answer? No, I'm kidding. So just answer anonymously and send it in. So the question is, do you believe that all things come from God? Therefore, you don't own anything. So answer that, submit it, and answer it. Let's see where everyone is.
I'll keep it open for 10 more seconds. There's your results.
So 70% said yes, definitely. Wow, it's either one or the other. I do, but yet still find it hard to trust God. Can I have by a raising of, no, I'm kidding. I was going to say by raising of hands so I can just shame everyone in this room. All right, so that thank you for your honesty. And the reason that I think it's important to talk about this is because I think it makes it challenging to live generously if we don't believe that everything comes from God, and we don't believe that we have an extremely generous God. So my hope tonight is that we'll change a little bit of that thinking for those that don't believe that. And for those of you, I hope to encourage you to move forward. So again, I'll repeat, in order to live generously, it begins with a recognition that God is a generous God. So we want to be like him. Today, I'm going to be reading from the Message. Generally, I like to read from the NIV or the NLT, but just in doing this study, I thought the Message just kind of had some, wow, what was that? Had some verbiage that I thought was good, and hopefully will hit home. So I'll read with
George, unmute yourself. I muted everybody real quick, so go ahead and unmute yourself again.
So Psalm 145:16 in the Message says, "Be generous to a fault. You lavish your favor on all creatures." So that talks about God. It's telling us God is what? He's generous to a fault, and he lavishes his favor on everyone. So see, God is generous to everyone, and he's generous to not only believers, but to unbelievers. So he is a generous God. Deuteronomy 15, verse 10 to 11 tells us, "Give freely and spontaneously. Don't have a stingy heart. The way you handle matters like this triggers God, your God's blessing in everything you do, all your work and ventures. There are always going to be poor and needy people among you. So I command you, always be generous. Open your purse and hands. Give to your neighbors in trouble, your poor and hurting neighbors." So he tells us right there, it's pretty clear. I command you, always be generous. He doesn't say if you feel like it, if you have a lot of money, if you're in a good place, if your faith is further along. He doesn't quantify it. He just says, I command you to always be generous. And if you're anything like me, that was not always my story. That was not always my case. And I'll get to that later. So this verse talks about really having what is called an open heart generosity, which is really desire to just help other people. It's a mindset. Am I reaching out? Am I serving? it's really a hard issue. There's also another thing called an open hand generosity, where I'm giving my time, my gifts, my money to help others. There's an open hand generosity. So it's just a different way of thinking. So look for opportunities to be generous, and it doesn't have to be always material. It's not, let me see how I can help someone by giving. No, let me be compassionate. Let me give someone a smile. Let me give someone being generous in just the way I am with them. It's not always material. We always think of being generous with material. We can be generous with our time, but we can be generous with our actions. So in thinking of that, I was thinking it's pretty simple, but in relationships, if you think about it, we're either a plus in people's lives or we're a minus. So either we're adding value to someone's life or we're taking away. So here's a question for everyone. It's not for you to answer, but here's my question. What are you? Are you a plus in people's lives, in your relationships, in your work relationships, in your marriage, in relationships with your children, your social relationships? Are you a plus or are you a minus? Are you adding value to those relationships, to the people you come in contact with? Or are you a minus? Are you a drain? Because there's kind of, either way, there's two kinds of people. You either lift them up, you're a giver, or you lean on people and you take away. So I want you guys just to think about it. Think of the reason that God blesses us. God blesses us so then we can be a blessing to others. So today I want to talk about then specifically different points on how to live generously. So I'll encourage you guys to take some notes. There'll be 5 points. I'm going to go through it. So hopefully you guys have a writing instrument to write these down. And if you can't find something to write it down with, then go find something, because these are important. So here's another verse that I think would serve well. It's 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17, 19. Tell those rich in this world's wealth to quit being so full of themselves and so obsessed with money, which is here today and gone tomorrow. Tell them to go after God, who piles on all the riches we could ever imagine, to do good, to be rich in helping others, to be extravagantly generous. If they do that, they'll build a treasury that will last, gaining life that is truly life. See, when people read that in whatever version, you always think they're talking about someone else, right? Tell those that are rich. Well, the reality is, guys, is that everyone probably in this room is rich, because if you're making over $30,000 a year, you're in the top 1% in the world. So again, it's perspective, right? We're now, most of us are probably in a difficult season, but but that means that everyone else that's generally less than $30,000 income is probably in a far worse situation, because their starting point is much less, right? So we're always, whether we recognize it or not, compared to the rest of the world, we're in the top 1%. So when God said that, tell those rich in this world, that's us. He's talking to you guys, he's talking to me. Stop being so obsessed with money, which is here today, gone tomorrow. Be extravagantly generous. So that's a question for you guys. Marvin?
It's coming. Goal number 2.
Is your financial situation keeping you from being more generous?
George, while we're waiting for the poll results, Anthony, I wanted to know the last scripture that you just referenced, 1 Timothy.
1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 to 19. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 to 19.
Great, thank you.
Sure. And when you read it in the message, and this is from my good friend Ray Rungwala, so shout out to you, Ray, he loves the message, and he kind of got me hooked on it for this one. So is your financial situation keeping you from being generous? 21% said yes, 76% no. Sure. Okay. Good. I'm glad to hear that. So Marvin, when we check the records for CA, we'll see if these guys are full of baloney or if it's true, right?
No. We're not doing any of that.
No. I'm looking at everyone's name and I have access to this stuff. So, I will find you down and you guys will meet with me if you're lying. Okay, so here we go. So what does living generously look like? So here are the 5 things. I encourage you guys to write them down. First, we live generously when we live on the other side of yes. What does that mean? Answer is yes to everything. How can I help? Yes. Is there anything that you need? Yes. What can I do to serve? Is there anything that just yes. Because if you guys, I'm sure, know a lot of people that live on the opposite side, right? You're living, people that say no, that always say no. See, what happens is when someone asks for your help, I think this is your first reaction. I can't, no, I can't because, or is it yes, and I'll just figure it out. So how do we live generously? By living on the other side of yes, just yes for everything. People that live on the other side of no, they see the problem before they see the potential. They see the difficulty before they see the opportunity. You're always looking at things from a different perspective. So here's a verse for you in Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8 to 11. God can pour on the blessings in astonishing ways so that you're ready for anything and everything. So if you're living on the other side of yes, you're ready for everything and anything. If you're always ready to say yes, then when God is ready to use you, because he says here, be ready for anything and everything so he can pour his blessings. So if you're ready to say yes, then he can use you. More than just ready to do what needs to be done. He gives you something you can then give away, which grows into full-formed lives, robust in God, wealthy in every way, so that you can be generous in every day, producing with us great praise to God. Let me read that again. God can pour on the blessings in astonishing ways so that you're ready for anything and everything, more than just ready to do what needs to be done. He gives you something you can then give away, which grows into full-formed lives, robust in God, wealthy in every way. It doesn't say wealthy in one way, in a few ways, wealthy in every way, so that you can be generous in every way, producing with us great praise to God. So the first thing is we want to live on the other side of yes. The second thing is how does living generously look like? We continuously sow seeds. So that's the second one. We continuously sow seeds. So be a seed sower. By the seeds you sow, not the harvest that you reap. Ask yourself this question, because I ask myself this. This is part of my prayer life on a daily basis. The wording I use is a little different, but I ask on a daily basis is, Lord, how can I impact your kingdom? And I ask that. How can I impact your kingdom? And the reason I ask that is because I'm aware that I'm not the most creative. I don't have a million ideas that pop in my head. So I just want to do what God has assigned for me. So God, if you have an assignment for me, just tell me what it is. Just kind of lay it for me. Don't make it difficult. Just tell me exactly what it is, and I'll do it. And then my second part of that prayer is change my desires, because there are going to be times, unfortunately more times than not, that I'm not going to want to do it. So the truth is I have to ask God to change my heart, so then I'll want to do what he asked me to do. So it's kind of a twofold prayer. So then I can sow seeds. I can then serve. I can add value. I ask myself at the end of the day, today, did I serve? Did I give? Did I add value? Or did I take today? Again, was I a plus or was I a minus? The field says to you, you need your seed. Not your need. The field says, bring me your seed, not your need. So how many times in life are we always looking at the things we don't have, right? Are we living on a daily basis looking at, if I only had this, as opposed to God's provided all these things for me. look at what you have, not what you don't have. So sow every day. We get caught up on our own needs and scarcity. So think seed, not need. Luke 6:38. This is what Jesus said. Give away your life. You'll find life given back, but not merely given back with bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting, is the way. Generosity begets generosity. Read the last sentence. Giving, not getting, is the way. So we want to sow seeds. Most people are preoccupied by increasing their standard of living, right? Here's a challenge for you. Be preoccupied by your standard of giving. I stole that because I thought it was very clever from John Maxwell. Most people are preoccupied by increasing their standard of living. Be preoccupied by your standard of giving. That's a world of difference. So living generously means that you're continually sowing seeds. You're just pouring into people's lives, continuing to do things. So the first two, live on the other side of yes, say yes to things. How can I serve? How can I give? What can I do? How can I pour into other people's lives? What are the things that I can do? How can I fill a need? The third thing, by living generously, we're growing in our faith. 1 Peter verse 5-9 says, so don't lose a minute in building on what you've been given, complementing your basic faith with good character, spiritual understanding, alert discipline, passionate patience, reverent wonder, warm friendliness, and generous love. So how do we complement our basic faith? He tells us here, good character, spiritual understanding, alert discipline, passionate patience, reverent wonder, warm friendliness, and generous love. Each dimension fitting into and developing the others. With these qualities active and growing in your lives, no grass will grow under your feet. No day will pass without its reward as you mature in your experience of our Master Jesus. I want to share a story with you guys. It's kind of hopefully brief, but this is part of my story. And I used to joke about it, but I look at it differently. It was probably about 11 years ago when, about 11 or 12 years ago when I was invited to a huddle. And it was with Tom and Mark. And when Tom taught on generosity and on giving, up until that point, I was not a person that had tithed. I gave, my wife and I, and we gave, and we thought we were generous, but our standard is always a lot different than God's standard. So definitely much lower. So when I went to lunch with Tom, and I'm the kind of person that if you show me something in scripture and explain it to me, then there's a pretty good chance that I'll be obedient and follow it. So I had lunch with him, and I said, I want to talk to you about tithing, because we talked about it last week and this and that. I want to see exactly in scripture where it says that. And as only Tom can, he shows about 5 or 6 different scriptures. So then I told him what our household income is, and I said to him, so are you saying 10% of that? And he said, no, I'm not. And I think, oh, thank God. He says, but God is. So the joke was that, because we've tithed since that day, that was the most expensive lunch in my life. But I changed the story now because that was probably one of the most blessed days of my life because of the impact that had on me. Because since my family, we've tithed. But God had to continue a process in me, because that was the first step. So for me, the first step was obedience. The second step then was God needed to change and develop a generous heart in me, because that's what flowed from that, because that was not natural. I thought I was generous, but God had a different standard. So I went from being obedient to generous. Then the third step is he grew my faith, because then that allowed me to go, you could say blindly, but make leaps of faith, at least financially and other ways, in things that I thought, I'm not sure about this. I don't know if I could do that in this season of my life. I'm not sure I can make these decisions. but because God had shown himself to be so faithful, not only in the past, but especially during these past 10 years, that it made those decisions easier. To the point, I wouldn't say it's a pinnacle, but to the point where 3 years ago, I answered a call to ministry where I sold my practice as a practicing CPA and joined the staff of CA. So my point is that I'm kind of a walking billboard for, if you live generously, your faith will absolutely grow. Absolutely. So that's the third point. Before I jump to the fourth point, here's a question, again, not a poll question, but to ask yourselves, because I believe this to be true, that tithing increases your faith. But have you ever asked yourself why God asks us to tithe? Because I hope we all come to the conclusion that God doesn't need our money, right? He's God, so he can produce whatever he wants, so he doesn't need our money. And most of us here, at least by the poll questions, accepts the truth that everything we have comes from God, so he can keep it if he wants it. So why would he ask us to tithe if he doesn't need our money and everything comes from him? Well, the answer is it's to increase our faith. That's why he asks us to tithe, because I'm not going to get into a talk about tithe right now, but when we talk about the tithe, it's your first fruits, right? You give 10% of you earn of what your increase is. So it takes faith to give it first, not a tip at the end of the month or the end of the year, whatever's left over, right? That doesn't take faith. That's just accounting or balancing your checkbook. This is what I have left over. But true faith in tithing is, I'm giving you the first part. So that's why God gave us tithing, increase our faith, because he knew that would be an area of challenge for us. So I digress. Okay, point number 4. When we live generously, and this is the one that is probably the most important to me, we attract people to God. That was always a prayer of mine growing up when I was in college, and my faith became a significant part of my life. And I share this with my oldest son, and that was something that he kind of took to heart, is I always wanted to turn people onto God, not off to God. I used to think my office was in Santa Monica. If you guys know where 3rd Street Promenade, my office used to be on 5th in Santa Monica, not 3rd in Santa Monica. So we used to go to 3rd Street Promenade all the time. And if any of you have been there, you see, people there with billboards, repent or go to hell, those Jesus followers and things of that nature. And I used to think, how can that possibly bring anyone to Jesus, right? And I say, I never want to be like that. I want to be one of those that turns people onto you, Lord, not off to you. I don't want to tick people off because they've spent time with me. I hope that when people spend time with me, they're attracted to you. So this is the 4th point. When we live generously, we attract people to God. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 to 16. This is what Jesus said. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. See, you'll prompt people to open up to God. You'll be an attraction to what God is like by the way you're living, by the way you're acting. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 7 to 11. Be generous with the different things God gave you, passing them around so all get in on it. If words, let it be God's words. If help, let it be God's hearty help. That way, God's bright presence will be evident in everything through Jesus, and he will get all the credit as the one mighty in everything. Encores to the end of time, oh yes. So and I just love that the message is so it's so unique and so different than all the other versions. When we live generously, we become attractive. When we become attractive, then people want to know why we're different, right? That's what the salt, being the salt and the light, that's what that means, by the way. So when people see that, they want to know about faith, our smile, our kindness, our mindset, if we're always wanting to help. This generous lifestyle makes people hungry to know God. Part of our job, I believe, is to make people hungry to God. So my challenge is make your lifestyle attractive to lost people. Question to ponder. It's not a poll question, but when's the last time your actions, your attitudes made people hungry for God? I was thinking about this today. So all of us at some point, those that are married or any other relationship, we're probably looking at you guys, it was a long time ago, but so, and then you, Marvin, with the hair. So it was probably a lot different many, many years ago. So we all wanted to be attractive, but we wanted to be attractive for ourselves, right? Because there was something that we're trying to get. Think if we put all that energy in making ourselves attractive for God, so people will want to see, man, what's different about the way he carries himself, the way he the faith that he has, the way he treats others, his kindness, his smile. Just think about the season that we're in right now, which is clearly a challenging season. What's going to separate us from the non-believers? Are we acting attractive, or are we, walking around like Eeyore? Are we attractive to others? So ask yourself that. Okay, and the fifth point on how to live generously is we receive more than we can ever imagine. So remember, we can never outgive God. So Proverbs 11, verse 24 and 25. The world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. The one who blesses others is abundantly blessed. Those who help others are helped. So please don't misinterpret. This is not a give to get message. This is not prosperity gospel. That's not giving. That's like a trade-off. That's, let me give so I can, this is not a give so I can get kind of deal. But it's a biblical principle, right? We cannot outgive God. There's no way we can do that. So if we know that, knowing that should change how we are. Again, the first question, do we know everything comes from God? Well, wouldn't it be great if we were basically like a messenger? All the blessings that God gives me, I'm going to be a vehicle to be a blessing to other people and truly believe that I have more than I need. Here's a principle that I believe. I believe that God gives us more than we need, so we give the excess away. That's why we have more. Because he always says, I promise to provide for all your needs. And he says, I promise to provide for all your wants. I promise to provide for all your needs. So if he covers all those needs, then everything else is extra. So why would he give us extra? Well, part of it, he probably allows us to keep and wants, as a blessing, certainly. But the abundance he gives us, wouldn't you think it's so then we can share that with others and give to others? Wouldn't you guys, ponder that? There's this thing I read called the exchange principle. Every person that passes through life will leave something and take something. So my point is just make sure you leave more than you take. We talked about be a plus, not a minus. The last point, the sixth point on living generously, we live out our God-created identity. Matthew 5, verse 48. In a word, what I'm saying is, grow up. Your kingdom subjects, now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously towards others. God lives toward you. So when we say we want to act, I want to be Christ-like. I want to be Christ-like. I want to be like Christ. A lot of times we throw that phrase around because it sounds catchy and it sounds, kind of Christian-y and all that. I want to be Christ-like. Well, how do we become Christ-like? He tells us right there, be generous and be gracious to others. See, God will only give to you what he knows will flow through you. So here's my last point. Jesus identified money as a primary competitor for the affections of the human heart when he said, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. Here's a question for you guys. Does money have you mastered, or do you have money mastered? Who's the master? Is money the master, or are you the master? See, we used to joke when I was in practice in public accounting, it's different now because I don't think anyone has a checkbook. When I mentioned that, I was speaking to Millennials Fusion. I said, when you look at someone's checkbook and they're, what is that? Okay, because no one has a checkbook. But in the old days, we would always say, let me see your checkbook and I can tell you what's important to you, right? That never lies. How you spend your money, where you spend your money, that's pretty good indicator of what matters to you most, right? If you're spending your money on this, it's important to you. If you're spending your money on that, it's important to me. So where your money is, that's where your heart is. So who's your master? So here's a question I have for you guys. In this COVID period, how are we going to respond? All these points. Are we respond by living our God created our identity? Are we going to respond by having open heart, open mind, open hand, generosity? Are we going to be seed sowers? Are we going to be living on the other side of yes? Are we going to try to grow our faith? Are we going to be attractive to people? What is it that we want to do? We talk about being Christians. We talk about being generous, people of faith and all those things. I believe there's a big difference between being a Christian and being a Christ follower, right? To me, that's almost like the next step. Because to be a Christian, to me, means it requires faith. But faith, to me, does not require action. But being a follower of Christ, when Jesus said, come follow me, that requires you to do something. So being a Christ follower is a doer. Being a Christian, to me, is I have faith, and I'm not knocking it, but how do we become Christ followers? By the way we live. So open it up to questions.
Before we ask any questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording so that way any questions don't get recorded.